right, hey, welcome. The two of you that have joined already. Let's see if someone else is joining us, otherwise we'll just get started. I think today's going to be a hi, Dublin 88, hi, Sylvia. Hello. I think today's going to be a quick one. It's just going to be me chatting. There's no guest today. I guess the main goal here is to, I guess for those of you who kind of follow my story, I think it's obvious already, because I've been recently continuing my education within the whole longevity ecosystem with a nutrition course right now. And I think a great way to study and to learn more is, of course, you have to kind of do the work, but then talking about it and exercising, explaining it to others is a great way to learn. Basically, that's my main goal here. So just to talk about what I've learned and perhaps and hopefully help anyone that is interested as well. And today we're going to talk about gut health. My goal here is then share what I learned, open the floor to any live questions they have here, but as I didn't know how many people would join, I asked a couple of days ago for people to send a few questions in a question box that is on my stories, and then I got 10 questions that I thought were really good. And I'll just kind of go briefly through an explanation of what your gut is, why it's important, because I didn't know it before. And then after we go through like the basics, we'll just answer those questions. So I think it's going to be a short live today. I think if any of you want to join or ask questions live, please feel free to do that. I would love to do that, and hopefully I'll be able to answer. If not, I'll just follow the little script with the questions that I wrote down here, the answers, and then here we go. All right, I hope you enjoy as much as I am. So basically, I think one of the questions, and it's the question that I think makes the most sense to start with, is why the heck has gut health become such a topic? And well, it has become a topic. And in the beginning, a few years ago, I didn't know why. I always saw the gut as something dirty, as something not really important. However, as I started learning more about it, I saw that, wow, I think the gut is called your second brain, and that's for a good reason, right? And let's start exploring why, right? So I didn't know that, but your gut actually has about 400 to 600 million neurons, which means that it's more neurons than your whole spinal cord. So it's a big deal, right? And that's why it's called your second brain, because everything and your gut is connected through those nervous systems with every other part of your body. So it's a two-way direction, a two-way communication with every single tissue and organ in your body. It's called your second brain, and maybe you've heard about the gut-brain axis, which means that your brain is in direct communication with your brain. But it's not only with your brain, it's also connected to your lungs, to your muscles, to your bone, to your mouth. So basically everything that happens in every part of your body, in every tissue of your body, sends information to your gut of how your gut should act, react, what it should produce, but also everything that happens in your gut influences every other tissue that I have just mentioned. So that's why it's so important, because basically what happens here influences there and vice versa, right? And this enteric nervous system, which is what your gut nervous system is called, controls everything that happens there, everything that is automatic that you don't really have to think about, right? So, and that involves your digestion, your bowel movement. You don't have to think to have bowel movements, right? Enzyme secretion, hormone production, the whole thing. And that communication, what happens in your brain influences how you digest your food, for example. So your thoughts can play a role in how your gut health plays out. And that's what we're going to explain a little bit more with the questions. But before we go, I think it's important for understand how have a brief overview of how your gut actually works. In your gut, your intestines are divided into your small intestines, then the large intestines, and your colon, right? And we generally refer to the gut as being your colon and large intestine. But here we're going to talk about not only your gut, but the small intestine as well as a part of a whole ecosystem, right? So a quick overview is that whenever we eat, the digestion starts in the stomach and then ends in the intestines, right? And that in the gut is where most of the bacteria live in the body. And I was impressed with that, but there are more bacteria in your gut, that's what studies say at least, than the amount of cells in your whole body. It's kind of close, but I think the number of bacteria are even higher than the number of cells, like almost 40 trillion bacteria in your gut. That's insane. But then whenever the food starts being digested in your stomach, it goes to the intestines, and that's where the digestion will end and all of the nutrients will be absorbed. And then when those nutrients, they get to your intestines, the bacteria that live there will start fermenting the food particles that pass through the gut. And fermentation is just a process. I didn't really know what fermentation was before, but it's just a process of breaking down molecules that doesn't need oxygen or anything specific. It's just how bacteria decompose food in those particles, right? And especially that's what they do with the fiber you ingest. Fiber is going to be a key word here, so already it's very relevant to introduce it. And you have to know that the thing that feeds the most that bacteria in your gut is fiber. Mostly soluble fiber. We have insoluble fiber as well. There's some bacteria can ferment a part of it, but it's mostly the soluble fiber that we eat that feeds all of the bacteria. And when they ferment soluble fiber, we have molecules that are called short-chain fatty acids, that are molecules that send those signals that I mentioned before to the rest of your body. Postbiotics, which is all of the byproducts, everything that the gut bacteria produces after fermenting food, are a combination of different molecules. Short-chain fatty acids are a part of those. And why are short-chain fatty acids important? Because they send those signals that I mentioned before, regulating what happens in the rest of your body. For example, propionate, which is one of those short-chain fatty acids, goes to the liver and helps regulate the production of cholesterol and glucose in favorable ways, right? So it helps you have better glucose control and a better lipidic profile. Acetate, which is another short-chain fatty acid, goes to the bloodstream and then can be used as energy by muscles and other tissues. And there's another one, which is perhaps the most famous that some of you might have heard of, is butyrate. I hope I'm saying all of those names right. In English, the pronunciation might not be the best thing for me, but butyrate is perhaps the most famous one. And it's the primary energy source for the cells in your gut lining. It helps regulate your immune responses in the gut, and it's linked to overall lower inflammation and reduced colon cancer risk. So very important stuff, right? So whenever you're producing those, if you are feeding your gut bacteria with good food, they will produce these short-chain fatty acids. They will send signals to the rest of your body that will help regulate all of those things that we talked about. So it's important to do all of that, right? And then let's go to a few of the questions that I received, because then we're going to explore some more of those relationships between those short-chain fatty acids, body functions, and everything else that can provide and sustain a good gut health and good gut microbiome in your intestines. So the first question is, does hydration play a significant role for the gut? And yes, it does. And more than you think, because before we talk specifically about the gut, I just want to highlight how important water is for life in general, right? We need it for everything, because not only our body is made of 60% water, but we need water as a solvent for basically all the chemical reactions happening in the body. So for everything to happen, they need a solvent, and water is that major solvent. So if you need proper hydrations just for your cells to work as they should, including the cells in the gut, right? But I think the most relevant answer here is regarding to our digestion and the gut health with proper hydration, right? And when we eat fiber needs water to be able to perform the roles that it does, right? So we have soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Insoluble fiber is the fiber that we don't really digest, and you can think of, for example, the type of fiber that gives plant foods structure. So the skinning fruits, the wall of the cells. It's a type of fiber that we don't really digest. We don't have the enzymes for that. But then there's also, and it's very helpful because it's the one that adds bulk to your stool. So it goes through your intestines, kind of dragging with it any toxin or anything that has to go out before it causes damage. It's very important, and you need water to kind of to make sure that that insoluble fiber moves through your gut. But also for soluble fiber, you need water. Soluble fiber becomes a gel in the gut, and you need water for soluble fiber to become that gel, and that gel is what is going to regulate glucose absorption and a bunch of other stuff. It will help bind to cholesterol, so you can excrete cholesterol, which helps lower your LDL, for example. So it's very important, and water is necessary for fiber to do all of that. And one thing that's worth adding, your gut has a defense system, let's say, which is what we call it the gut lining. The gut lining is kind of a protective layer around your gut that stops things, toxins and food particles and everything that doesn't belong outside of the gut to go out of the gut. And that lining is 1 cell thick. It's very, 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 very thin, right? But on top of that gut lining, you have some mucus. And that mucus is produced by the gut lining, and there's a lot of bacteria there. But for that mucus to be healthy, you need water as well. So if you don't have that, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and your gut microbiome is unhealthy, you can suffer from then leaky gut, which causes a whole host of other problems. So water, proper hydration is essential for good gut health. Now, let's go to the second question. Which foods help and which foods harm the gut microbiome? And perhaps this is one of the most important questions here, because to put simply, we can feed either... I'm trying to break it down and make it as simple as possible, right? And I think the simplest ways to explain it is that you can either feed or promote the health of the beneficial bacteria in your gut, or the harmful ones, the ones that are not going to produce the beneficial compounds that we just mentioned before. And on the other hand, they will produce inflammatory compounds and stuff that will harm the gut lining and will allow for particles, toxins to go outside of the gut and go into the bloodstream, causing inflammation and a bunch of other stuff. So you can either feed one or the other. And ideally, you would choose the foods that would feed the beneficial gut bacteria. And I think there's two things here that are the most important for them, which is, again, fiber and polyphenols. And polyphenols are compounds from plants that are beneficial to us, especially because they have very high antioxidant properties. That means that they help deal against oxidative stress, which causes inflammation, right? So it's a way that we can, through food, improve our tolerance against, or our defenses against inflammation, right? And both of them come largely from the same sources, which is great. Plant foods. So everything counts here. Fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts, seeds, grain, spices, and herbs. Everything counts to this amount of fiber and polyphenols that you should be ingesting to feed the positive bacteria in your gut. So when choosing those, ideally, you would choose whole foods with fiber and polyphenol contents from varied sources. And variety here is important, because different types of fibers will feed various types of bacteria, and having a more diverse microbiome is consistently linked to better health outcomes. There's even some research saying that show that people who eat 30 different plant foods per week, and that's including everything, right? 30 plant foods, considering everything that I just mentioned: fruit, vegetables, legumes, nuts, seeds, all of that, right? Spices, herbs. People who eat 30 or more, they nurture a more diverse gut microbiome, and that is linked to better health outcomes than people that eat just 10 types, for example. 30 sounds like a lot. I was doing the math for my case, and I don't think I eat 30. But 30 is not the number you have to be fixated on. I think the idea here is just know that the more, theoretically, the better. And everything counts. So if you eat 3 types of veggies one day with some different seasonings, some nuts, it all counts, right? Mangoes and strawberries counts as 2 different plant foods. The only thing that doesn't really count is, for example, if you eat red capsicum and yellow capsicum, that counts as 1. Otherwise, I think it's easier to reach those 30 plant foods a week than you would think. So variation is important. And when it comes to things that you should avoid, I think the more artificial or the less nutritious the food, the more harmful they can be. Because if you have artificial sweeteners, coloring, ultra processed foods, those are all food types that feed more of the harmful type of bacteria in your gut. Eating the occasional ultra processed food is fine. What the problem here is consistency, chronic consumption, right? If you consistently feed more the harmful bacteria in your guts than the healthy type, what's going to happen is that over time the harmful bacteria will overcrowd the beneficial bacteria. Instead of producing all of those short chain fatty acids and all of those beneficial postbiotics that we discussed, we're going to be promoting the production of inflammatory ones, things that will decrease or harm our immune system, cause fatigue, inflammation, and all of those things. So everything that is too artificial would be minimized or avoided to the extent that you can. Because like we said, especially ultra processed foods, for example, one of the things that happens when you're ultra processing that food is that you remove all of the fiber, the antioxidants from the food. They're very nutritionally poor, and if you don't have all of those nutrients that we discussed, you're starving the beneficial bacteria. If they starve, there's nothing they can do to promote gut health, right? And then, what are the signs that your gut is not working as it should? That's another question that we had. And there's a few symptoms that are, there's lots of symptoms, but I rank them on my script from more obvious links to gut health to less obvious links that would require, ideally, consultation with a doctor, right? So I think the most obvious ones that are connected to this gut dysbiosis is what we say, is, for example, excess gas, discomfort in the region, bloating, constipation. Those are all things that are clear, more obvious, that you know something might be going on in your gut. And then ideally you would explore that, pay attention. One helpful thing to have is a food diary, for example, if you're consistently experiencing those symptoms. Because remember, it's not about having it once or twice, it's about consistency in how often those symptoms happen. Then you start writing down what happens when you eat some sort of food, when you experience bloating after a meal, what kind of foods you had that day, and then you can try again some of those foods another day and see if you have experienced the same or not, because then you will be able to define what is the food that is causing that distress in your gut. But then there are less obvious symptoms as well. So skin rashes, brain fog, weight gain, they all can be symptoms of an unhealthy gut. You won't necessarily connect them to poor gut health. And that's when a consulting with a doctor can come in handy. So you can kind of request some blood work to see if anything's happening, because hormonal imbalances, nutrient deficiencies, these can be things that don't show up directly, don't show up immediately. So these are all symptoms of gut dysbiosis, but those are things that perhaps would be better to be discussed with a doctor to see if there's any link with your gut health, or if the cause is from another imbalance in some other area of your health. And then we can talk about daily habits that promote good gut health, which is something that I love, because longevity, it's all connected, and I love that. Everything is connected. So for you to promote good gut health, ideally you would have a proper lifestyle across all areas of life, because your sleep, your stress management, your exercise routine, your nutrition, everything affects Everything is a part of a whole, and everything that you do in each of those pillars individually will affect the body as a whole. So having a lifestyle that leverages the best of all of those pillars is the simplest answer that I can give. I'll just give a small example here so you know how that works. I think overall we all know what are good habits and good lifestyle choices that we can make for those pillars that we discussed. That's not the main goal of the conversation today, so I'll just give an example and then focus on nutrition and gut health. So with a poor night of sleep, for example, you can mess with your appetite regulation. You will feel hungrier than normal, less satiated, and then it would also increase your cortisol levels. And then higher cortisol levels with appetite dysregulation will likely increase your stress and can lead to a bigger insulin spike, and with that, cravings for palatable foods, and palatable foods are generally ultra processed options, right? Which will then feed the harmful bacteria in your gut. That's an example of how a poor night of sleep can impact your food choices, and your food choices will then affect your gut health. Of course, again, the point is not that I ate a snack, I ate chips the other day, my gut health is doomed. No, of course not. But it's if you consistently have a poor sleep routine, that can lead to gut issues further down the line. It's all what we do, the habits that we have. And habits are things that we repeat over time, right? So that's one example. But I want to focus on nutrition here, and I think the most effective habit that you can have is choose better foods. There's no really escaping that. We already talked about how healthy gut bacteria feed on fiber, especially soluble fiber. So make sure that you have a diet reaching them, so that you nurture the good bacteria, and the good bacteria can create all of the postbiotics that are good for your health and maintain a health gut environment. Keeping the gut lining protected, avoiding leaky gut, and that anything that doesn't belong out of the gut goes out of the gut, right? Because if it does, that's leaky gut, you will engage your immune system to fight those infections, and if that keeps happening over time, you can get into a state of chronic low-grade inflammation, and chronic low-grade inflammation is connected to higher risk of basically every chronic disease that there is. So yeah, I think those are the main habits that you have to have. Nutrition is the biggest one. Just make sure that you eat proper, ideally whole foods with all of the nutrients they need to feed the beneficial bacteria in your gut. And when we talk about what to feed your bacteria, we can come in with some concepts that you might have heard of, which are prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic, right? I think postbiotic I already mentioned, which is the compounds that the gut bacteria produces after they ferment the food. So let's focus now on prebiotic and probiotic. Postbiotic, is the compounds that the bacteria produce. Probiotics are live bacteria. So fermented foods like kimchi, yogurt, sauerkraut, kefir, kombucha have these live bacteria cultures and when we eat those foods, that live bacteria can temporarily enrich our gut microbiome, right? It's like we said before, a variety of microorganisms in the gut are connected to better health. So when you ingest those, you're basically nourishing a more diverse gut microbiome, which is linked to better health and move the needle towards a beneficial environment in your gut and overall health. And prebiotics are the food that this bacteria eats. So I think you can think of a timeline, right? Prebiotic, probiotic, postbiotic. Prebiotic are the fiber and the foods that this bacteria feed from. I think this one is, I hope I was clear enough. If not, again, if anyone has any questions, comments, or anything, if anything wasn't clear, just send a message and I'll read through. All right, so now we talked a bunch. And we're going to talk now about how we can improve naturally your gut microbiome without the need of eating probiotics, for example. And I think you can approach this one in two different ways, right? Giving what your gut microbiome needs and avoiding the things that harm it. And we talked a lot about that already. So choose good food sources, eat a varied diet with plant foods, different types of especially soluble fiber. Eat also foods that give you insoluble fiber to help with all of the intestine transit, the stool transit, so you can keep a clean environment, an environment where your bacteria can thrive and produce all of those short chain fatty acids that are important for us, but also avoid the things that will starve them, ultra processed foods, too much of artificial foods like we have discussed already. But also, as we have mentioned, that the whole body is connected. It's not only about the food that you do, but a very important way for you to nurture a good gut microbiome is just by having good or better lifestyle choices. Prioritize sleep, stress management as direct health, gut health tools as well. Cortisol, for example, if you have high levels of cortisol chronically, that will suppress the levels of your beneficial bacteria, the size of the population, they will decrease, right? Independent of the food you choose. So your stress levels also matter a lot for your gut health, for example. So those are things that you should pay attention to. Next question. Is there a connection between gut health, immunity, mood, and energy? I really like that one because, like I said in the beginning, I didn't care about gut health in the beginning until I understood that yes, your gut is connected to your immunity, your mood, your energy, all of that. It's a very strong connection, right? We said already how the gut is directly connected to different tissues in your body, including the brain, through the gut-brain axis, like we have discussed. And it's a two-way communication system, right? It runs mostly through the vagus nerve. But I think what is important for us to know here in terms of immunity, mood, and energy, like the question asks, is I don't know if you knew that about 70% of the immune cells that we have in our body, they live in the intestines. So there is a very strong connection with our immune system here. They're there to react and fight any harmful bacteria compounds that go through the gut. It's very important that they're there to respond quickly to any pathogens that we ingest, for example. But if you nurture poor lifestyle habits, and that's including again nutrition, sleep, exercise, and that undermines our immune system's ability to respond to those toxins, pathogens, and stuff. And that will affect your whole body. So yes, poor gut health can impact your overall health through impairing your immune system's ability to react properly to any threats. Your gut also plays a huge role in mood regulation. That I didn't know as well, but about 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut. Serotonin, you might have heard of it. Your gut produces serotonin, which is known as the feel-good neurotransmitter, the hormone, right? 90% of it is produced in the gut. It's not the same as the serotonin that your brain produces. It doesn't. The serotonin that your gut produces doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. However, it influences your mood indirectly through that signaling that we were talking about, right? The brain, the gut, they're connected, and the production of serotonin in your gut also plays a huge influence in your mood overall through this connection with your brain. So it's a very significant impact in your mood as well. And energy, of course, in two different ways. I don't know exactly which kind of energy you were talking about, so I wrote both in my little script here. If you mean energy in terms of the energy that we need for our body to function, yes, the gut plays a big role, because after all, the energy that our cells need to perform their functions comes from the nutrients that we eat, and the nutrients that we eat can only be accessed by them through the digestion that happens in the gut, and then from the nutrients that we absorb in the intestines, right? So energy for that, definitely it's important. But also, if you mean energy in the sense of having energy to do things, to have the disposition to do this and that, it's also connected. Poor gut health, chronic inflammation, all of that disrupted signaling, perhaps, they can contribute to brain fog, low energy. So, and some people might be used to that, but that's not normal. A healthy gut microbiome and a healthy gut will contribute to better energy levels overall for you to live and enjoy life. So yes, gut health is connected to all of that. However, there comes a time, and that's our next question, asking about the connection between age and gut health. It changes. Our gut health is directly impacted by our aging process, because most of our cellular functioning changes with age. I think that the whole concept of aging kind of revolves around the idea that our bodies start slowing down, and cells stop working as they once did. And it's the same with the cells in your gut. So as we age, some people can experience slower bowel movements. We might secrete fewer enzymes, leading to poor digestion. If we have poor digestion and absorb less nutrients, we might have to supplement with vitamins, and we might have less energy, like we discussed previously. And the microbiome composition tends to become less diverse and less resilient. As we also have discussed a bit before in our live video here, a more diverse gut microbiome is related or connected to better health overall, right? So with a less resilient, less diverse microbiome, we can have a less resilient overall health. So protecting it as early as we can in life is the way to go. It's better to do that. And another thing that is important mentioning as well is that hopefully that's not the case for most of us, but as we grow old and sometimes we have more illnesses or diseases, and we have to use more medication to deal with all of that. Some medication, like antibiotics, they can wipe out or damage the microbes in our gut, that then will lead to an even less diverse and less resilient gut microbiome. So that's something that we have to pay attention to as well. And if eventually that happens to someone, it's important to perhaps follow up with a doctor, of course, always in first place, but perhaps supplement with probiotics to make sure they repopulate your gut microbiome as you should. And the last question that we have here is between the connection, is about the connection between exercise and better gut health and better. It focuses here on bowel function, but I think you can apply that to gut health as well. And yes, exercise is in general very helpful for all of that. Exercise is on its own helpful with bowel movements, because it increases gut mobility. If you exercise, you're going to increase your gut mobility, meaning that you will speed up the transit of your stool throughout your intestines. And like we mentioned before, that alone is important because you make sure that you're removing every toxin and everything that shouldn't be stay in your gut, that it doesn't stay there for as long as it should, right? So if you increase motility, you're making sure that as you go to the toilet, you are excreting everything that doesn't belong there. I don't have a list of specific exercises that can help with that, but I think the general idea is that anything that gently engages the abdominal region, like the cat-cow exercise. If you guys don't know, it's the one basically you're in all fours and you move your back and you push your belly downwards and upwards, and there's some yoga poses that help with that. Anything that gently moves, engages that area of your body can help with gut mobility and bowel movements. Yes, and I think that brings to a close. Those are all of the questions that I had. We did for those of you who joined later, we started talking about the basics of the gut and gut health in the beginning, and then we went across a few questions. It went much longer than I was expecting. Thank you for everyone who stayed the whole time. I'll give you a minute or two to ask any live questions if you have any. If not, we have a question here. If you could only choose 3 things to eat for your gut, which ones would they be and why? Yeah, only 3 things. I wouldn't just choose 3 things because, like I said, I think the most important thing is variety, right? So I guess I would try not to eat just 3 things. If I was absolutely forced to, I'll try to eat plant foods that are rich in especially soluble fiber. But I think the goal here is try not to stick just to the same foods all the time. Try to vary per meals per week. Try variety. I think variety is the question here. Yeah. All right. 1 more minute to see if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, we'll bring this to an end. Already with my heartfelt thank you for everyone who joined. I hope it helped. It definitely helped me. It was a challenge as well because now it's a more personal note. I've done lives with guests in the past, and it's much easier to do lives with guests because you have someone to exchange with. Doing it on my own is a bit different. It was definitely new to me. To be speaking by myself, but I hope that you all could learn something just like I have been lately on my course. Well, apparently no further questions here, so thank you very much for everyone who joined. Maybe we have one. A fun fact about the gut that I haven't shared yet. I'm not sure. I think I shared everything. I think the one that surprised me the most, I have shared it already. But I think the one that I was the most surprising to me was the fact that we might end up having more bacteria in the gut than the number of cells in our whole body. I think that just shows how complex of an ecosystem that is, and how important it is to take care of it, to take good care of it. All right, thank you very much for everyone who joined. This will be recorded. I'll share the content later on as well in case any of you missed it. And then I would love for you to like and share it if you can. And I wish you guys a great Sunday, rest of the weekend for all of you. Bye.